Good morning, everyone. We will start in a few seconds, so please take your seats. So, very warm and early welcome to this first session hosted by Nordic Energy Research called Offshore Wind Energy in the North Atlantic. And there's a number of good reasons why we should discuss offshore wind. In our part of the world, it's an extremely important element in the green transition. But there are also a number of important political issues that we need to touch upon in order to make sure that we can sort of fulfill this idea about getting energy from the wind. And the first one will be that the coastal areas and the power in the wind is a common resource, is a resource belonging to society, and we need to discuss how can we actually make sure that society actually get a part of that value. So that would be one question. A second question could be if we have conflicts between offshore wind power and other professionals living from the sea, and of course that's first and foremost fishermen, but it could also be others. And then thirdly, we need to discuss issues related to wind turbines and biodiversity. And that's questions that's important if we want to make sure that we have broad public support for deploying as many wind turbines as possible. So that's sort of the scene we have here today. And we will have a number of presentations. I'll come back to that in a few seconds. But just to say, we will have, for the sake of time, we will have the presenters presenting, and then we will have a panel discussion in the end. And the idea is basically that I will ask a couple of questions, but the audience, if we have time, is very much welcomed to engage in the discussion as well. So moving on, I will be the moderator, for this session here. My name is Rasmus Wendt, and I work with a company called Unnur Green. It's a state-owned energy company from Greenland. And I think it's fair to say that Greenland is one of the places where you should not put up offshore wind. At least you will only have them for one season. Otherwise, the ice will take them away. But let's move on. I said before that wind energy is one of the most important sources of energy in our part of the world. And I think that can be illustrated quite well looking at this map here. It's a model showcasing where we will have the highest wind density around the world. And I think it comes out very clear that the Arctic region is indeed a powerhouse when we talk about wind energy. And there's a number of natural resource reasons for that. But nevertheless, this is an enormous source of energy that we can harvest right outside our coastal areas. So in order to discuss both the political issues and also the possibilities in the different countries, we have invited a very knowledgeable panel to be with us today. And I will present them in the order they will speak, and we have them up here on screen. That is not the order, though. So we will start with Astrid Bratli. She's advisor at Nordic Energy Research, and Astrid will talk about coexistence and nature, inclusive design in Nordic offshore wind farms. Astrid is a program officer for the Offshore Wind and Biodiversity Program at Nordic Energy Research, and she holds a master's degree in international relations from the University of Gothenburg and IIT in Delhi. And then we have Unnur María Þorvaldsdóttir, Executive Director for Wind Development at Landsvirkjun. That's the national power company here in Iceland. And she will talk about potentials for wind energy in Iceland. Unnur has been with Landsvirkjun since 2007, and she holds a degree in electrical engineering from the Royal School of Technology in Stockholm and a master's degree in e-commerce. Then we will have Michelle Quinn, Director of Offshore Wind from the Scottish Government, and Michelle will talk about ScotWind offshore wind experience, beginning with the end in mind. Michelle has held various positions across the Scottish Government. More recently, Michelle has held the post as Principal Private Secretary to the First Minister and has been Interim Chief Executive Officer at Transport Scotland. Michelle is a graduate of Queen's University Belfast, a Fellow of the Institute of Civil Engineers, and has completed the Major Project Leadership Academy at Oxford University Business School. And finally, we will have Kári Mortensen, who's head of the Energy Department in Iceland, and he will talk about an energy-integrated North Atlantic region. And Kári holds a master's degree in biochemistry and mathematics. So thank you very much. And Astrid, will you be the first one to take the stage? And you need to point like this.
Okay, good. Just in case. There we are. So this is me, and here I am. So I'm here to just give a very brief introduction to a report that we just published together with DNV. It's very long, and I only have 8 minutes, so good luck to me. It's based on 2 workshops that we had with 75 different participants, and I'm going to go through some of the results. So, first of all, what's the deal with offshore wind? Everyone is talking about it, there are lots of conferences, it's all over the media. But why are we talking about it? It is actually because it's not going extremely well, as you can see on the graph, with this collective effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There's a very easy, simple solution. It's just to close off all the taps and all the valves on everything that is polluting. But it seems very difficult to get people to forget their Teslas and their iPhones. So instead, everything is pointing towards us needing more energy than we already have. If we're going to fulfill the goals of the EU, to reduce the emissions by 80 to 95%, we'll have to come up with better solutions. So we need sustainable solutions. And this is where offshore wind comes in. So this used to be a very untested and extremely expensive idea, but as technology and innovation has propelled lately, it's actually become a quite competitive energy solution in just a couple of decades. It is renewable, and it has enormous potential, especially in the Nordic region. So in April this year, 2023, 9 countries went together and signed a declaration where they pledged to build 300 gigawatts of energy in the North Sea. The different countries also have individual goals. Norway, for example, has aims to allocate areas for 30 gigawatts of offshore wind before 2040. Which is a nice number, but it doesn't really mean anything if you don't have anything to compare it with. So 30 gigawatts of offshore wind is nearly equivalent to Norway's entire electricity consumption per year. So this means that it has huge potential, and it's renewable. So let's go! And no, let's not go. There's just a small, very teeny tiny detail, which is that the ocean is already filled. There is someone living there. Last year, WWF estimated that since the 1970s, we've lost over 69% of the species that we have. And we cannot continue doing this, so we'll have to find other solutions. So it's filled with animals, and lots of activities are going on already, including fishing, which has been a long tradition and one of the most important industries that we have. So looking in the future, the areas are going to look like this. There is going to be lots of competition for the areas, both in new and in existing activities. So this is 2030, and this is 2050. So the conclusion must be that we have to prepare collectively to cooperate and to coexist. So collaboration is something that we like. That's why we invited lots of different stakeholders. You can see the list of them here, and then some of the brand names. I didn't have enough space to put all of the brand names on. But we had more than 75 different participants from the different sectors and with different perspectives. So 70 participants, 70 voices that needed to be heard, 70 different perspectives. So it looked like this. Complete mess, like crazy shooting. No, of course it didn't. Not so much indeed. And why did it go so well? I think this is maybe because we had some quite clear goals for the discussions. So these were the main 3 goals, in addition to actually meeting up, because there are not that many platforms where you can meet across sectors and across countries and across different energy companies and institutions and research institutions. So one of the goals was actually to just create a platform where we could meet each other. And this resulted in a quite long and quite extensive report where we listed up 22 different tools that the authorities can use. But I don't have time to go through them all. Or do you want me to go through them all? No, I don't think I have time for that. So I'll just show you the picture of how the list looks like, and then I'll go through 3 main findings. But the overall conclusion is that coexistence is the only solution we can see. So here are some of the findings. One of the big questions were, what's more important, Tesla or fish? How do you measure value at sea? How do you measure value between different species? We can measure the value of fish and species that we have commercialized, but what about the price for the species that are not in Kim Kardashian's face cream or in Fruta de Mare? This is very difficult and almost impossible. So that was one of the issues. The next issue was, how do you measure the value of actually failing to conserve things that we don't really commercialize? So the conclusion was somewhat like insurance. You buy house insurance because you assume that nothing's going to happen, but just in case your house burns down, you buy it anyways. So you have to be precautious. We have to consider that, I think we must consider that destroying the habitat of vulnerable species has enormous consequences, and we have to do everything to minimize the biological impact. And one of the solutions could be this quite untested phenomenon called nature-inclusive design. This is a method where you can put quite clear goals into the design of infrastructure which already exists or new infrastructure. So you can add on elements or you can build them into the design of the structure in itself, because every single thing introduced to nature has a potential of destroying biodiversity, of course. So here are some of the examples. You can, for example, have a cod hotel, which is for free and you don't have to check in or anything. Fish, they don't have money, so you can just have it installed next to or not too far away from the instruction that you're building. You can have protective layers over the cables, for example. You can have biohuts. You can add holes or blend shells into the concrete. Or you can have different sort of solutions when it comes to the optimized cable protection. So this is quite untested. It's quite a new concept, but it's something that we need lots and lots of more research on. So this is just in the very beginning. But you have to start extremely early. Like even before the tendering process is starting, you'll have to consider what kind of nature-inclusive designs you could install in the infrastructure. So that was finding 2. And then the last finding is coexistence requires cooperation. So that's easy to say, of course, but you have to start extremely early, and it has to become, everyone participating in the workshop said that if this is supposed to be a successful thing, you have to start as early as possible. But you need the platforms, and we don't really have that many intersectoral and across nations platforms. So even though you have to start early, the first thing we'll have to do is we have to establish different kind of platforms where we can cooperate. They have to be cross-border and cross-sector, because many of the people attending the workshop said that one of the problems with this industry is that we work in silos and we don't exchange data. For example, data on species or maps are usually very national, not distributed across borders, and we need more international cooperation in order to figure out, because fish don't have passport. They can go from Sweden, they can go to Denmark, they don't really know where the borders are. So that's why I think meetings like this is very important, where we meet people across sectors, across maybe think tanks and across nations, and we try to collaborate, because coexistence is the conclusion, the most important thing. If you want to read lots more, then you can use this QR code to look at the report. Yep, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Astrid. I think it came out quite clear that even though that there are problems or issues, there are also solutions. And I also think it came out quite clear that in the Nordics, we don't not only having a lot of wind energy or potentials, we actually are also quite good at talking together. So that will bring me to my next speaker, Unnur from Landsvirkjun, who will talk about the potentials for wind energy. Iceland, please enter the stage. Iceland is already well known for, that's not the, okay, so the order here is different than the one that we have here. Should we take, no, we'll continue with you, and then,
okay.
So, sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you, and welcome. My name is Unnur María Þorvaldsdóttir, and I'm the Director for Wind Development in Landsvirkjun, the National Power Company of Iceland. And I'm here to speak about the potential for wind energy in Iceland. But let's start a little bit about Landsvirkjun. Landsvirkjun is the biggest electricity producer in Iceland, with approximately 70% of the generated electricity in Iceland, where we produce electricity in 16 hydro stations, 3 geothermal stations, and 2 small wind turbines. We are 100% state-owned company and were founded in 1965. Our capacity is 2,150 megawatt, and we produce approximately 15 terawatt hours of electricity each year. But we are here to talk about wind. But let's start about onshore wind, as we have, as a country, just started the onshore journey. Since 2012, we at Landsvirkjun have had 2 wind projects in development, and it was actually last year that those projects were approved when the 3rd phase of the Icelandic Master Plan for Nature and Protection energy utilization was approved by the parliament. And this was a big milestone for us in Iceland, as those were the first two wind projects that were approved in the category, the utilization category, which means that we have something else, just not hydro and geothermal, we have the wind now to develop. And we hope that those projects, as we can now continue to develop those projects, that we can see Búrfellslundur, for an example, up and running in 2026. But although those were approved last year in the master plan, we have still the legislation and laws and the framework for wind in Iceland under development. And what about offshore? Yes, I said we just started the onshore journey in onshore wind, and we need a framework there, but we also need a framework if we will continue to develop offshore wind. And what we need there is that we need more resource, just as Astrid mentioned, and laws need to be updated to capture the things we encounter when we develop offshore wind. And we need to take a holistic approach. We need to look into the environmental aspect. We need to look into the effects on fishery, because that is one of our main industry in Iceland, and the transport sector. We are an island, and we need to be able to secure shipping to and from the island, like, for example, with goods. But we have some challenges in Iceland, and actually the depth around Iceland, the ocean is very deep. But where we have relatively shallow water, we also have spawning areas for fish, which are quite sensitive in many places. And where it is shallow, we are also quite close to the coastline, and what the feedback when we have been developing wind onshore, one of the biggest feedback we get is the visual aspect of wind turbines. But if you are close to the coast, you will also see them. And so this is a challenge we need to meet. But there are other things we have to take into consideration. We have quite high waves in Iceland, and the equipment need to be strong, so we can meet the power we will encounter when developing offshore. We have quite rich bird life. We have seabirds. We see the puffin there on the picture, and the puffin needs to get the food from the ocean, and it's a species which is in a critical state at the moment. And we also have the fish in the sea, and we have the mammals. We have seal, and we have a lot of whales around Iceland. And this is something that we really need to take care of and work together to get the best approach. But people often ask, okay, how does onshore wind compare to offshore wind in Iceland? And I will just give you some ideas. As you probably saw yesterday and for the past few days, we have a lot of rain in Iceland, and we have quite high wind. That goes for onshore, and that goes for offshore as well. We have been running 2 resource wind turbines at one of our stations, and we see that we have quite high efficiency when we look at offshore wind, but we also have high efficiency when we look at onshore wind. And in our stations, our wind units produce approximately over 42% each year, which is quite high. And then we have like onshore in Iceland, it's quite easy, of course, depending on where you are, where you lay the wind farm, to connect to the grid. But when you look at offshore, the connections are complex and they are very expensive. And especially here in Iceland, we don't have the infrastructure in place, so it could be very expensive. And looking at this at the moment, I know there are the development goes fast for offshore wind, but still the cost for offshore wind is approximately 5 to 6 times more expensive than onshore wind. And just short, there is a really interesting development going on for offshore wind in the world with great potential. We have though just started the journey with onshore wind in Iceland, which is not as complex as offshore wind. And we need a framework for both onshore and offshore wind to be able to develop things fast to meet future needs. And offshore wind is still very expensive compared to our sites in Iceland for onshore wind. And there are still quite many questions that need to be answered. Should potential areas be auctioned out? Should they be subsidized as in many other countries? And research is quite expensive. Who should pay for the research? And as a company, we really follow closely the development in the world, and we are here to learn from others. We want to make best practice to meet future needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Unnur. I think extremely interesting to hear from a country that is in the beginning of the process of deploying wind energy. And now we'll move to Scotland. I think it's fair to say that you are quite mature when it comes to wind energy, so I'm very eager to hear your perspective, and I'm sure you can pass on a lot of best practice to the rest of the countries. So Michelle, welcome to the stage.
Good morning, and thank you, Rasmus, and thank you, Astrid and Unnur, for such thought-provoking presentations. So, Scotland has vast territorial waters and an extensive deep water potential, and they present us with an almost unparalleled opportunity to develop our offshore wind potential. This is a sector where we are already recognised as global leaders. We are already home to the world's first and one of the world's largest floating offshore wind farms at Kincardine. But that's just the start for us. We're now preparing to scale up this early success with a sharp focus on commercial projects. We know that we have the opportunity to deliver a pipeline of 40 gigawatts, including about 23% of the global floating wind capacity. Through a seabed leasing process that we refer to as ScotWind, 20 projects were granted seabed options agreements in 2022. Together, these have a combined ambition to deliver around 28 gigawatts of offshore wind power. These agreements will last up to 10 years. Of these 20 projects, about 14, representing just over 17 gigawatts, will use floating technology, making ScotWind the largest scale floating offshore wind opportunity in the world. Scotland is already a world leader in floating wind testing and demonstration, and we're really excited about the opportunity that this presents for emerging technology and innovation at a commercial scale. As part of our leasing process, supply chain commitments were required from the outset, hoping to ensure that there was a focus on building that capacity from the very beginning. Our latest figures show about £28.8 billion worth of developer commitments, representing about £1.5 billion per project. This has also raised about £750 million in revenues for the public purse through the leasing process, and will bring billions of pounds worth of investment to the Scottish economy. Innovation and targeted oil and gas, which we refer to as INTOG, is a further leasing round for offshore wind projects that will directly reduce emissions from the oil and gas production in the North Sea, and it will boost further innovations. This has been designed specifically to decarbonise our activity in the North Sea. It provides an opportunity to build on Scotland's legacy of offshore engineering for a clean energy future. This will deliver a capacity of 449 megawatts for innovation projects and 5 gigawatts for targeted oil and gas projects. They will target innovations which will include the development of the supply chain, novel approaches to commercial methods, development of the offshore wind industry into new markets, and cost reduction opportunities. Scotland is also leading the way in our approach to marine planning. We heard about some of the challenges that this presents earlier. We will ensure the most efficient management of both pre-application and post-consent process to shorten timescales where possible. Our sectoral marine plan is due to be delivered in 2024, maximising deployment in Scottish waters, whilst aiming to protect marine users and, of course, very importantly, our environment. We're also working hard to broaden the scientific base which underpins that consenting process. And again, we heard about the challenges of this earlier. Our work is at the forefront of global research into the interactions between offshore renewable energy and the marine environment, making Scotland a world leader in this field. And this year alone, we are investing 2.8 million in new research projects to address those evidence gaps. And we're keen to look for opportunities to share that data and learning, and to collaborate with other nations, like some of those represented here today, who may be looking to take forward similar studies in the future. So where are we today? Well, things have been moving very quickly for those of us involved in the offshore wind industry in Scotland. Over the last few months, we have been engaging extensively with the industry, with developers, with investors, and with our marine stakeholders, really listening so that we can understand the challenges that they face and the opportunities that they can help us to deliver. We're conscious that given our particular regulatory environment, we must also work closely with the UK government on the development of the transmission grid and to ensure that they too are listening to developers and investors. And we are engaging internationally at events like this one today to identify potential areas of collaboration, to learn from our friends and near neighbours, and to develop strategic partnerships. Just this Tuesday, our First Minister announced a Scottish Government commitment to invest £500 million of public sector funds over the next 5 years. This commercial and grant investment will stimulate and support private investment in infrastructure and manufacturing facilities that are critical to the growth of our world-leading offshore wind sector. It will support market activity, helping to create highly productive, competitive economy, providing thousands of new jobs and embedding innovation and boosting skills. But the point that I really want to make here today is that Tuesday's announcement is a strong signal. It underlines our absolute determination to truly maximise the economic opportunities and the benefits from our offshore wind potential, whilst balancing those with other marine users. A huge part of this will be ensuring a just transition that takes our existing skilled workforce and supply chain with us. We will work closely with industry, all of our industries, to focus on the opportunities for skills, development and diversification from the oil and gas sector, in line with our commitment to a just transition. This will mean that public sector partners will adopt a consistent approach to any strategic investments and to ensure that we maximise our trade opportunities. Together, with our public and private sector partners in Scotland, we have also developed our strategic investment model to move from project-led to sector-led development, to sector-led investment that better supports growth in ports and supply chain across the piece. Ultimately, This whole collaborative, streamlined, consistent approach to investment will provide us with the building blocks to deliver a successful offshore renewables sector in Scotland. Scotland has a wealth of pioneering expertise to share with international partners. We want to build on our legacy of offshore engineering to create a clean energy future. Success for us means governments working together, learning together, businesses growing together, and ideas being shared between all of us to succeed. We heard how important this is in the earlier presentations. With the scale of our offshore wind potential, our offshore engineering heritage, our extensive network of ports, and our strong innovation clusters, Scotland is right at the heart of Europe's energy transition and right at the heart of our future energy security for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. We will have a short video from the Faroe Islands, and then afterwards, Kári will take the floor and elaborate a little bit more upon the issues related to creating a grid, I think. But we'll hear that later on. But yeah, let's see the video.
Det var i samtøyene. Det hadde vært trenden rundt omvåknet av tøyene. Og andre samfunn har meldt ut ved at de kunne ta i 2004, 2004-2012. Men vi tenkte, let oss vite og arbeide frem mot at gjøre det sin fyrr. Ta kunne jeg se om en visjon, om at man mente at landet kunne godt løyve alt som det var av landet grønt i 2030. Og det var faktisk arbeidet etter så, ja. Det viser jeg, vi har utrolig gode ressurser i Faroe. Vi har vind av flere støv og man for 20 sekunder. Vi har nekva vattnorsk og tøka. Vi har parst solorsk og øsne, og vi har altorsk og øsne. Og så arbeider vi rettelig spennende tøkene som sjøavfallsorsk. Og her med annet en rettelig spennende verskatland vi har køyrande i Vestmannsund, hver det nek dreker som kommer køyre bottnet. Og det som vi har råknet fram til det, hvis vi får utnyttet sjøavfallet optimalt, så kunne vi spære faktisk rettelig nekvar uiløv i sol og vind. Vi tar en enkla elveiding. Elskipene enkel i Faroe, og her vi det eisende enkelt at gjøre røndreim som slam. Tog at vi tar ikke en rikve av byråkratiske prosedurer omkring disse vidskiftene. Det har tiltrekk samstarver i en stor mål. Tog at det gjør enkelt og bøylet og kjøtt. Faroe lite land, men vi komplett land. Til small scale med full scale. Det vil si at du kan testa på en bøylig måte og få urslit som rikker ut i store systemer. Da man får ut og skal bygge til dømes av en vindorskopark, så det øyelig område der man hever et samstarv i feltjastenen og høyre deg og gjennom av sammålene. Det er etnast særlig vel alltid. Tjokk. Det er det. Føringer rettelig påstyrt at det kommer til hverandre orsk og EU-kippa seg. Det er her man, om man vil øyelig gjerne til å slippe av i oljene som det primære, og at du baker ekten kjelter. Den største avgjørelsen det at vi har ikke kapler til nabolanden tjokken. Det er at vi skulle til øynekvast å stabilisere elkjerver tjokken, og det er øyelig tropult da man hever nekva ustabile vindorsk inn i kipene. Det det øyelig område, jeg vil si all nøye tjokken å bygge speklig, så vi lærer kipene å kjenne og gjøre det nøye og atøysen til å stabilisere elskipene så kvart som vi bygger utverande orsk. Det er et myndet ikke alt avgjørende. Og i øyne av akkurat åttjene av Sorøytene, her har vi en øyelig spennende verskatland i gang, hver vi bygger ut kraft ved vindorsko, og så gjør vi stabiliserende tiltøk, altså vi nødger takkene som skal gjøre det så at vi kunne køyre ved vatten og vind og sol bære. Det er at vi skulle utfase til dieselorskene som køyrer og øyne i det. Man sier Sorøytene en løyt lodge, som farger en løyt land, og så videre. Så han lærte om vi får Sorøy, han kommer vi bruke i mednøysen og i fargerne. Halt nudge takkene og at hun vil rønda går til i førjen. Det er alltid Syrasens rom, det er ambisjoner vi har i førjen, og det er sånn førjer som et land hvor de kan prøve seg takkene. Vi kunne faktisk være vidt til å skapa løsner for de store landene. Landet til åkken blir kjent for å være visionært og geng undan, og det kan man være fegnast om. Og ingen er løydel til at det går opp.
Okay.
Tryck på det grønne.
Ja.
Ja. Hello. Exploring new horizons. I'll tell a little bit about that. First, we are in Faroe Islands gradually becoming friends with our powerful wind companion, and I can be glad, even glad, when the wind is blowing. And I looked at the power production this morning. It was approximately 90% of our electricity production this morning came from renewables, from wind and hydro. This is fantastic, I think. And this picture shows the situation in Suðuroy, as he mentioned in the film. At this moment, we are 100% electricity production from wind, really. And that's because of these new batteries he talked about, Terje, and about the synchronous condenser. It is amazing, and it is really saving a lot of heavy fuel for our electricity production. But now let me continue, because we are only in the beginning in the Faroe Islands. We're still using a lot of oil. In 2022, we used 400 gigawatt hours of electricity, and the consumption will be, if we project it out towards 2040, and we are really trying to electrify everything we can on land, all sectors, then we will have a three-doubling of the electricity demand for reaching the need on land. If we on top of that put the need of energy for our maritime sector, and here we have this assumption that we are making ammonia for our ships instead of using diesel, we have an enormous task ahead of us if we want to be self-sufficient with green energy. And we really want to do that, and we are determined to do that. So we will need more than 10 times as much electricity as we are using today, over 3 terawatt hours. And of course, this challenge is huge for a small island like us. And personally, I don't think that we can rely on our land area for wind energy. It's simply too small for such a large amount of wind energy. So we have to look other places, and of course, we look out into the ocean, where we are situated in the middle of it. And this chart shows the sea area around Faroe Islands. We are a small island. We are small islands, but we are a large ocean nation. And the area of our continental shelf is 275,000 square kilometers. There's a lacking a nil there. And out of this area, approximately 40,000 square kilometers are with bottom depths between 100 and 200 meters, really well suited for floating wind turbines, as we have heard about here today. And the rest of my presentation, I shall say, has not yet had a political treatment in Faroe Islands, although the politicians and also the people in Faroe Islands as a whole are aware of these possibilities that are growing and getting closer and closer to be realistic also here in our region. So in SEV, the electricity company, has looked at the fixed bottom wind farm east of Nólsoy, which can produce approximately the energy we are using today. But I personally think, and I know maybe that this project will never be realized because it's too expensive if you compare what you get out of it to the investment. Also, it is close to the islands. It is visible from land. And also seabirds living on Nólsoy are flying through this area. So there are environmental and visual aspects of this project that are maybe difficult. So why not look further out into the ocean, where the wind speeds are, average wind speeds are increasing, almost 11 meters per second. You heard about Iceland, it's the same area. And out of sight, out of mind, if you go far out, you cannot see them from land. That's also very good. So we have together with SEO looked at a project here east of Faroe Islands, which is huge in our measures. And we look at 2 gigawatt of wind turbines. For example, 150 maybe wind turbines, each 15 megawatts. And the production will be around 12 terawatt hours a year, and that is even 4 times more than all the need we have when we are totally self-sufficient with energy in all sectors. So of course, a project like this is calling for cooperation outside Faroe Islands, and both because of the energy production and also because of the economical reasons, of course. And we are looking to the south, to Shetland, which is our closest neighbors and where we should have good relations. And we are thinking about a picture like this, HVDC cables from Faroe Islands and down to Shetland. And on the way, maybe giving energy to the upcoming oil installations here between Faroe Islands and Shetlands that they also talked about before. And of course, we could also take all the energy on land in Faroe Islands and produce ammonia and then export the energy as floating ammonia. I'll end with this picture that is front page of a report we made in 2016 in collaboration with the North Atlantic countries. It was led by Orkustofnun here in Reykjavík, and the participants were from Greenland and from Iceland, Faroe Islands, Shetland, Norway, and Denmark. Thank you.
And you should stay on the stage.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Kári, for this presentation and the visions about creating a seabed grid in the North Atlantic. We will have a panel discussion now, and I very much welcome the audience to engage in this discussion here. We will have a microphone that we can share, but if I will have the panelists joining me here on stage, that would be a good first start, I think. Yeah.
Kan vi bare klikke videre, for det er feil nå?
Okay, and we have the microphone is out in the room, so that's good. But let me, I will allow myself to ask the first question to Michelle. Michelle, if you should point at some important barriers, not only for Scotland, but for the offshore wind industry as a whole, what would be the most important ones then?
Thanks, Rasmus. We've heard a little bit about some of the barriers that the various nations here are facing this morning, and actually there's quite a consistent picture building up, and one that we have also experienced. There is, everybody is expressing concern about public opinion and the way in which we bring the public along with us, and we can do this in a number of different ways. The way in which we engage is important. The way in which we consult in a meaningful manner and really listen to the concerns of the public is important. The way in which we build our evidence base is key, and in that regard, the way we can share data across nations and learn from each other will be critical. We have been looking at how we build our own evidence base, and this year alone we're spending 2.8 million on that, and we're looking at a whole range of environmental and socio-economic issues associated with offshore wind. But we don't claim to know it all. We are still learning, and we're very conscious that we don't know what we don't know, and for that reason we're very keen to collaborate with others. We're also, for us in the UK, we've got some, in Scotland in particular, we've got some specific issues relating to our regulatory environment, and those of you who are involved in offshore wind internationally will know that there were no offshore wind bids in the UK government's most recent contract for difference auction round. So we are working very closely with them to try and address that for the next auction round, because without those bids, without those developments, the reality is none of us can meet our targets. So not all the levers are within our control. We're trying to influence in some ways where we can't regulate. But I guess what this shows is that there is a real opportunity here for us all to learn together, for us all to develop our knowledge together, and for us all to think about what kind of research that we can do alongside each other that complements the work that we're doing separately.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that very elaborated answer. I don't know if anyone else in the panel will have something to add to this. Okay. No. Then I will invite the audience to come with questions. So if anyone have anything to ask, please raise your hand. We have one question here.
My name is Onassis Vlaakis. I'm from the Westford University area in East of Fjorda. I'm studying climate and global sustainability. The question that I have for you is that when do you think you'll be able to breach the gap between the use of fossil energy and renewable energy, especially given the current expansion of Scotland with the wind energy? When do you think you're going to get that gap breached at the current expansion?
For you, probably.
For me?
And I think the question is to Scotland, but I think it could be super interesting to hear the Faroe Islands and Iceland's respond to that as well.
So shall I start?
Yeah, please.
Thanks, Onassis. So again, this is something that's not wholly within our control in Scotland. At present, we produce somewhere in excess of 90% of renewable energy relative to our usage within Scotland. But we are not in control of all the levers, for instance, for consenting oil fields in the North Sea. So we are satisfied that for our own domestic use, we are nearly there. Another couple of years would probably get us to where we need to be, but unfortunately, as I say, we're not in control of all of those levers ourselves because of the regulatory arrangements. Thanks, Rasmus.
And Kári?
Yeah, yeah. There are two aspects of this. The one is the need for renewable production, and the other is the electrification of all the energy use. And I think in the Faroe Islands, we have ambitions to be green in the production side for all energy use on land in 2030. I think that's realistic. And I don't think that we are going to electrify everything before 2030. That's unrealistic. But within the next decade, towards 2040, I believe we will be in goal regarding the land. But on the sea, it will be, of course, longer. But with good cooperation and with the development we see now, it's not unrealistic to think that we are totally in goal before 2050. Thank you.
Yes, and in Iceland we are working towards the goal, and I think the transport in land will be the first goal that we will reach. And as a company, we have 3 development projects in the pipeline at the moment, which we think we can. We will get 1.5 terawatt online within next 4 or 5 years, which is a good step into this to reach this goal. And we are closely following the development in the transport sector, like shipping and so on. And that will probably be the next goal we will reach. The flight industry is quite more complex, as we still don't know what technique is going to be used, and etc. So I'm quite optimistic. 2040, yes, for at least the land transport and a part of the shipping industry.
Yeah. And I think it's also fair to say that shipping is a hard to decarbonize sector, and for instance for the Faroe Islands, for Iceland, and they're also very true for Greenland, it makes it really difficult to make the green transition fast, even though that we have access to a lot of renewable energy. Do we have a second question? I will allow us to run a little bit over time. We have, over there. You decide, Klaus.
Run back and forth.
Yeah. Okay, sure. I'm Rocky Weitz. I'm Director of Maritime Studies at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. In the U.S., our biggest challenge is the discomfort of the commercial fishing industry with offshore wind. So I wanted to hear what you had done in your countries to resolve that issue. Thank you.
Yeah, and Kai, can I ask you, because that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you, how do you handle offshore wind with a very large fishing fleet? So if you could start answering that question, and then of course we'll invite the rest of the panel.
Yes, as I mentioned in my presentation, the political issue is not quite. No, we are not. I must admit that the Faroese politicians are not ready yet. Even we are pushing very hard to get them ready. But if you talk to people and in the press, also you can see there is a genuine interest in doing these things, and also to see that there's a possibility of coexistence for the fisheries and for the windmills, because we are so far out in the ocean that it is fisheries and then there is wind, if it should be floating wind, these two, and of course mammals and seabirds, but I'm quite sure that will be no problem because the area is huge. And also if we take aquaculture in consideration, they will not come so far out. But that's also a question about environment that we have to address really carefully, as my companions here are mentioning.
I think
Astrid,
the
yeah,
first step would definitely be to establish platforms where the sectors can meet each other, because that's one of the key questions. That was something that they mentioned immediately in the workshop as well. Wow, what a nice opportunity to actually meet each other, because we're usually just enemies, and now we can discuss the same questions under like a relatively neutral platform. So establishing the platforms, establishing dialogue is super necessary for coexistence.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we will end here. So a very warm thank you to the panel. Let's give you applause. And then I just want to say, if you want to stay updated with news from Nordic Energy Research, you can use the codes up there. Thank you very much.